To another Sunday School Short. Today we are in Matthew 14, Mark 6, and Luke 9. Lots of parallels. We're going to move rapidly through this. Don't neglect the reading. Like, subscribe, and share. Hit the bell notification for new videos. Matthew 14. John the Baptist had been telling Herod, who was the ruler of Galilee, that it was wrong to marry his brother's former wife, Herodias. He called him out in public even. So Herod had him arrested and imprisoned. At a birthday party for Herod, Herodias' daughter, who was also named Herodias, performed a dance that pleased him. He said, "I'll give you anything you want up to half of my kingdom." She went to her mother, and then John the Baptist's head on a tray. "That's what I want." Herod regretted the vow, but he had to go through with it because guests were in front of him. He gave John the Baptist's head on a platter or on a tray to the daughter. She took it to her mother. Verses 13 through 21, feeding of the 5,000. This is one of the parallels that's in all four Gospels. Really cool. Jesus heard the news of John the Baptist, so he left on a boat to a remote place. Crowds followed him. He healed them, etc. That evening, the disciples discussed, "Hey, it's late. Send the crowds away so they can go into the villages and buy food for themselves." In verse 16, Jesus says, "That isn't necessary. You feed them." What do we have? Well, we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish. He looked towards heaven. Those things were brought to him. He looked towards heaven and he blessed them. Breaking the bread, he gave it to his disciples who distributed them. All ate as much as they wanted. They had 12 baskets of leftovers. There were 5,000 men, not including the women and children. Again, this is paralleled in every gospel. Verses 22 through 33, Jesus wanted his disciples to go back on the boat as he was to the other side of the lake as he was sending the people away. Then he went up on a hillside to pray. The disciples were in a boat about 3 a.m. Winds and waves overtook the boat. Jesus came walking towards them on water. They thought it was a ghost. But Jesus said, "Don't be afraid. I am here." Peter says in verse 28, "Is it really you? Or if it's really you, tell me to come out to you walking on water." 29, "Yes, come." He started walking towards Jesus, but then he saw the winds and the waves. He took his eyes off of Jesus, okay? "Save me, Lord," he says. And in verse 31, Jesus reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith. Why did you doubt me?" And he climbed back in the boat. The disciples worshipped him. And he didn't stop them, okay? This is because Jesus is God. Many times, Paul, Peter, John, Moses, angels, other people were worshipped. And they all said, "Hey, stand up. I just worship the Most High God. I just worship Jesus over here. Don't worship me, worship him. Join me." Matthew 14 ends with them crossing the lake, bringing many sick to him. All who touched him were healed. Mark 6, verses 1 through 6, parallels Matthew 13 and Luke 4. Jesus returns to Nazareth, teaching in the synagogue. The people were scoffing at this. You've heard this story before. He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary, brothers James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. Where did he get this wisdom and knowledge and ability to perform miracles? Jesus said a prophet is honored everywhere except his own hometown and among his own relatives and his family. Because of their unbelief, he couldn't do many miracles except heal a few sick people. Not that he couldn't. It's just that they were looking at him as a kid, as like a kid with special powers, like a genie in the bottle type of thing. They didn't believe his message. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Faith is the confidence that we hope for will actually happen." It gives us assurance about the things we cannot see. The last part of 6 through 13 speaks of sending out his disciples 2 by 2. This parallels Matthew 10 and Luke 9, giving them authority to heal and to cast out demons. Take nothing with you, no bag, no money, that type of thing. Stay in the same house until you leave that town. If the town people refuse to welcome you, shake off the dust of your sandals as a sign that they are abandoned to their faith. Mark 6, 17 through 19 parallels Matthew 14, where Herod had John the Baptist arrested because John the Baptist was calling him out in public. Again, we just spoke about this for marrying his brother Herodias. She bore the grudge. That's what Matthew says. And he didn't. He liked talking to John. John convicted him. Herod was greatly disturbed by this, and we know the story. he couldn't refuse what the daughter asked after the dance, so he beheaded him, took the head to her mother. Verses 30 through 44, the apostles returned from their ministry tour that he had sent them out 2 by 2. Jesus, let's go to a quiet place to rest, he says. He got on the boat, but a huge crowd had gathered where they were landing. He had compassion on him because they were like sheep without a shepherd. He began teaching. Later that afternoon, the disciples say, send the crowds away so they can buy something to eat. No, you feed them. I got 5 loaves, 2 fish again. Have them sit in groups of 50 to 100. 5 loaves, 2 fish. Look to heaven, bless them. Ate as much as they wanted. Afterwards, they pick up, again, 12 baskets, 5,000 men and their families. 5,000 men, not to include their family, women and children. Verses 44 through 52 parallels Matthew 14 and John 6. Again, Jesus walking on water. Mark adds that Jesus intended to pass by them, go past them. But when they saw him walking on water, they cried out in terror because they thought he was a ghost. Don't be afraid, he says. Mark doesn't include the part about Peter walking out to him. Luke 9, verses 1 through 6 parallels Matthew 10 and Mark 6. About sending the disciples out on the circuit of villages, preaching the good news, healing the sick. Verses 7 through 9, Herod heard everything Jesus was doing, and he was puzzled. Some said he was John the Baptist come back from the dead, who Herod had killed. We talked about that. Others thought he was Elijah, and others thought another prophet that had been raised. Herod kept trying to see him, it says. Verses 10 through 17, again, parallels the feeding of the 5,000 that we spoke of before. And verses 18 through 21 parallels Matthew 16, Mark 8, where Peter shines a little bit here. Jesus asks, who do the people say I am? Verse 18. The disciples say, John the Baptist, Elijah, another prophet raised from the dead. Who do you say I am? In verse 20. And Peter says, you are the Messiah, the one sent from God. Jesus warned his disciples, do not tell anyone who he was. Luke 9, verses 22 through 27, Jesus says, the Son of Man, which is the title he gave himself, must suffer many things. The last part of 22, he will be killed, but on the 3rd day he will be raised from the dead. And it goes on to say that if any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross daily, and follow me. If you hang on to your life, you lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. In the first part of 26, if anyone is ashamed of me and my message, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in his glory. Verse 28 through 36, 8 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John up on a mountain to pray. As Jesus was praying, his face was transformed. His clothes turned dazzling white. And they were speaking of, 2 men joined him. Moses and Elijah appeared, and they began talking to Jesus, and they were speaking of his exodus from this world. As they were leaving, Peter, not knowing what he was saying, blurted out, it says, this is the wording that he used, Master, it's wonderful that we're here. Let's make 3 shelters as memorials, one to you, one to Moses, one to Elijah. As he's speaking, a cloud covered them and said in verse 35, this is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him. And when the voice was finished, Jesus was standing there alone. They didn't tell anyone at the time what they had seen. Verse 37 through 45, the very next day, men in the crowd, son, my son, evil spirit seizes him, causes him to scream, have convulsions, rarely leaves him alone. I asked your disciples, but they couldn't do anything about it. Verse 41, Jesus says, you faithless and corrupt people, how long must I be with you and put up with you? Jesus' response was to the unbelieving, unresponsive generation. They wanted a quick fix. Just heal me. Just heal this. So I can go about my business. I don't want to change the way I live. I just want you to fix it. Or if you fix it, I'll do this. Does that sound familiar in today's selfish type prayers we have sometimes? Jesus rebuked the evil spirit, gave him back to his father. Then he said, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed at the hands of his enemies. Verse 44. But the disciples, they didn't understand. They didn't understand the significance of it. The significance was hidden from them, it says. But they were afraid to ask. Verse 46 through 48, the disciples began arguing about which was the greatest. So they've missed a bunch of stuff. And now they're arguing about who's the greatest among them. Jesus knew their thoughts. Interesting. Jesus took a small child. If anyone, verse 48, if anyone welcomes a child like this on my behalf, he welcomes me and welcomes my Father who sent me. Verse 48, the last part. Whoever is the least among you is the greatest. As his time drew near, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. He wanted to go to the cross for me and for you. All right? Verses 57 through 62 wraps this lesson up for the day. It speaks of the cost of following Jesus. Man says, I will follow you wherever I go. And Jesus says, foxes have dens, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. See, Jesus was saying he wants total dedication. That's what he wants from me and from you. Not a half-hearted commitment, okay? Think about the cost before making the vow. We can't selectively choose when and what we want to follow about Jesus. Get in God's Word. Get around God's people. Come together. Like, subscribe, and share. Share this with somebody who needs it. God bless you.